Hi, everybody, and welcome to SPSM 4.0.
Hello.
We made it. We did it. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there. I know it's been quite a couple weeks since SPSM 3.0 ended with our lovely previous host, Rudy. So thank you guys for hanging in there and keeping up with us and following us until now. So my name is Ashley Jaye, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Crystal Mcleod and Nyla Burton. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of what we're planning on doing for SPSM 4.0 for the upcoming year. And then we are going to transition to us sort of sharing our stories and sharing ourselves with you. And we'll also be asking you guys questions for us so that we get to know a little bit more about you. So for SPSM 4.0, we have a ton of things planned. For next month, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And during that month, we'll be hosting a series of interviews with experts and folks with lived experience talking about like domestic violence during COVID, gender and domestic violence, like how that plays into it, and many other topics there. And for next Sunday, we'll also be talking about Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. So we're going to be doing a critical review of the messaging for suicide prevention awareness and just overall looking at current suicide prevention efforts and what can be improved and, what's working well right now. So if you're watching us from Twitter, make sure to use the hashtag SPSM in your tweets. We'll be following along with you guys. And if you're on Twitter, if you're on YouTube or Facebook, just make sure to put comments in the chat and we'll be highlighting certain comments on the show. So without further ado, I want to let our co-hosts introduce each other. So first, we're going to start out with Dr. Crystal Mcleod.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Nyla. Hi, Ashley. And thank you guys so much for just blessing me with this opportunity. I'm super excited to be a part of this year's SPSM Chat. So, Ashley, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And Nyla, it's just been a pleasure as well getting to know you. So, I'm Crystal Mcleod. I am a Southern girl from the state of South Carolina, currently now living in the Midwest. As you can see, I have on a sweatshirt here, so it's pretty cold for me out here. I am also active duty military. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and most of the things that I specialize in is trauma, depression, anxiety, women's issues, particularly focused on women's trauma issues, as well as self-esteem as well. Also, substance use and abuse is an area of expertise that I work in as well, along with family violence. So I'm super excited about being here with you guys, and I really look forward to this year with you ladies. Thank you.
Yes. Nyla, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
All right. Well, first of all, I am so excited to be working with such incredible ladies, especially like doing such awesome work. I feel like, this is just going to be really cool. So, my name's Nyla Burton, and I am a writer. I write about basically everything, but mainly I do write about mental health and climate, and specifically like I write about climate grief a lot. So kind of the intersection of the climate crisis and just how we're feeling in our hearts, minds, and souls. I also write a lot about race and identity and just how all of those things factor just into sort of like the oppressions that we face in society and a lot of the joys that we face, like the joy of identity as well, because I think that's so important to focus on. Like I think that there can be something really beautiful in identities around like struggles with mental health as well. So I feel like that's all about me that's interesting. Oh, I live in Denver, but I'm from DC. And I go back to the East Coast a lot. So I feel like I like maybe like half here, half there. So yeah, not that interesting. Just
Oh,
Girl.
you're interested. I cannot wait to my Q&A with you.
Right. Right. Like, are you just gonna glaze over the part about how you have a freaking book deal? Are you just gonna?
Oh, I wasn't announce that yet, but yeah, I do. I have actually a couple, and thank you. And I'll be releasing more details about that sometime this month. So everyone, stay tuned for that. I am super excited, and definitely wanting to share that with you guys.
Oh my gosh, 2. Like, not only 1, but 2. I love that correction.
Yes.
2.
Ashley, please, the host, Ashley Jaye. Girl, tell us a little bit about you.
Of course, sure, why not? So for me, Ashley Jaye, hello, hi. Full time, I do social media marketing, and on the side, I do a lot of speaking engagements, and I'm also an actress as well. And so I would say I've probably been a mental health advocate for maybe like a good year or 2. And that's more speaking in terms of like the speaking engagements that I've gotten. Been doing that for like a good year or 2. And for me, I have a lived experience. So I'm diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, depression, and PTSD. Rudy so wonderfully handed the show off to me. I'm honestly like so honored, and I feel really blessed to be hosting this along with Dr. Crystal Mcleod and Nyla. So I'm really excited for you guys to see what we have planned upcoming, and honestly, I can't wait. It's going to be super exciting.
Yes, yes.
And now, why don't we get into interviewing ourselves and just like showing the audience like who we are and like what we're about, huh?
Let's do it.
And for those of you watching, please comment, like, share, and if you're watching us on Twitter, make sure to use the hashtag SPSM. Tweet us. We'll be responding, we'll be retweeting. And if you have any questions for us, honestly, tweet us with your questions, comment with questions. We'll also be answering those as well as the stream goes on. So, Dr. Crystal, why don't you start us off with some questions?
So I have a few questions for my lovely co-host here. And I first want to start with Nyla, because Nyla was so modest when we originally started. And a part of this time today is for you guys to get to know us, so that when we're talking to you over the next couple of weeks, you kind of know the vibe of who you're talking to. So I want Nyla, Miss Modest Nyla, to tell me a little bit about Essence, Vogue, British Vogue, by Shondaland, The Nation, NY Mag. I want to know more about those areas that our quiet Miss Nyla is currently involved in or was involved in. So Nyla, can you tell us a little bit about what type of features have you been presented or have you been featured in these areas, and give us some background on some of this work, because you're out here doing great work out here with 23,000 Twitter followers. So I want to know the business, ma'am.
Okay. I don't really, wow, that's like, how do I explain? For me, like, I've always wanted to be a writer, like, since I was a little kid. Like, part of it is that there are very few things that I'm good at besides writing. So, you know, when I left college, I got a job actually as a sexual assault prevention specialist, which basically meant that I was like going into schools and teaching workshops to kids from like elementary age to high school, also to colleges, about like how to prevent sexual assault from happening in their communities, which had a lot to do with mental health as well. And then, so just basically, to be quite frank, that job didn't pay enough. And so when writing opportunities came my way, I was like, this is awesome, extra money. now. And then I realized that I really, really loved it. I loved being able to read and write and just engage with people for a living. And so I decided to stop doing sexual assault prevention work and focus on writing full time, which was a hard transition in the beginning, just because freelance life is so kind of chaotic and unpredictable, but I soon found that it was so much better for my mental health. I'm diagnosed with bipolar disorder, PTSD, and so I, definitely being able to make my own schedule and be able, to have some more control over my day-to-day life was really, really, really helpful. And just to be able to express myself and talk about, for the most part, the topics that I wanted to talk about. So all of those bylines, those magazines that I've written for, I've so enjoyed getting to do that because I've interviewed some amazing people, and, politicians and writers and just all of these people who have these wonderful life experiences. And I've gotten to research really exciting topics, around the time that there were wildfires all over Australia, I was able to talk to Aboriginal communities, or people from Aboriginal communities, and just sort of get a glimpse into how beautiful their relationship to the land was, and just to tie that into climate grief. It was a sad subject, but it was really amazing to get to just report on all of these really important issues with all of these people who are doing amazing work. So I guess that's just a sum up of my journey as a writer, if that answered your question.
Yeah, we'll come back. All right, so Miss Ashley Jaye.
Yes.
I have to understand, how did you start acting? I think we want to know that. I want to know that. I need to know, how did this thing start? Where did this come from?
That's a good one. In terms of acting, honestly, I've just always wanted to act. I just remember as a little kid watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and I'm just I want to be on there, and not just because one of the characters has the same name as me, but I want to be on there. And so it's really started when I was young. I was actually in some modeling shows as a kid, but then I wanted to stop doing it because my mom said I got tired of it. And then from there in middle school, that was when I actually had my first play. I think it was a fairy tale play. And I was in one of the scenes. I think it was for the fairy tale about the fisherman and his wife or something, or some magic fish thing. And I was that magic fish in the show. And I loved it. As soon as I stepped on the stage, I was immediately I belong here.
Yeah.
And that's really rare. That's really rare for me to feel like I belong, because for me personally, I've always kind of grown up in predominantly white neighborhoods. I've always just kind of felt out of place constantly. But the stage was the one place where I'm oh my gosh, this is where I need to be. Mm-hmm. And ever since middle school, I just started acting in musicals in high school, and then in college, I tried out for different plays. I was on the speech and debate team in college, and they have this section called interpretation. So I did a lot of monologues, and won some pretty good awards there. And then after college, I started getting more serious about it. So I got my headshots done. I signed up for acting sites, and I started booking some commercial gigs, some stage plays, and then I even started dabbling more in sketch comedy recently. So I've been doing a lot of that.
So speaking of sketch comedy, I think the first acting piece that I saw from you, it did focus on some mental health stuff. And you talked a little bit about your own personal mental health journey. How has acting contributed to that, or how has that contributed to your acting and even comedy, and how have you kind of intertwined the two?
Oh, yeah. So I definitely would say I do a lot of solo performance now. And through my solo performances, that's where I actually write the show, direct or co-direct it, and then, I put it on, like produce it. And through my solo performance shows, that's when I started writing more about my experience with my mental health diagnoses. So one of my recent shows is called Who Wants to Be a Neurotypical? And in that show, I talk about my experience being a Black woman with borderline personality disorder. Because, BPD, as it's also called, is not understood as well. And especially for like a Black woman having BPD, which BPD is essentially an emotional dysregulation disorder. It was just this weird like mix of things that like I deal with, and just this intersectionality of being Black, being a woman, having BPD, like it's like I really wanted to talk about that in my solo performance. And so in my solo performance, it's actually like a series of these vignettes. So like I have like a game show, and then I'm in like the mental hospital, and then I'm like kind of like talking to the audience, just like as like me to the audience, and in a series, or I'm actually talking to BPD and my depression at the same time. Like I've personified them. And so just through the series of vignettes with like many different characters that I play, I talk about my experience with BPD and what that's like for me.
Yeah. Wow.
I have a question. So so like my first time really seeing BPD like portrayed on screen was, what's that movie, Girl Interrupted? Have you seen that?
No, I actually haven't.
I don't remember seeing that one either.
Yeah, it's like super white. Like it's like stars Angelina Jolie and everything. Like
what's it about?
It's about a girl with borderline personality disorder who like ends up spending a really long time in a psychiatric hospital. And I remember like the show really didn't portray mental health very well. Like it was really strongly suggested that she was like pretending or faking it. And so what I found was really interesting was when the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend came out.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, this is such a great portrayal of this condition. So I'm just wondering, like, what did you think about that show? Or how do you feel like BPD is portrayed in media in general? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I have seen Crazy Ex-Girlfriend up to at least maybe like season 2. So I haven't seen all of it. So I can speak to that one. I cannot speak to Girl Interrupted. But I would know that for BPD in general, we're definitely sort of villainized. Like that character that has BPD is villainized because, I mean, if you just do a simple Google of borderline personality disorder, like Google will fill in like, how do you avoid someone with borderline personality disorder? Like, how do you know? Like, or why does my partner with BPD manipulate me? Like, we're seen as manipulators, attention seekers. Like, we're not really seen as the human with complex emotions, as we are. And for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, I would say it's definitely been a lot better portrayal that I've seen. And like I really love how she I forget her name. It's like Rachel something.
Like,
I think
Rachel Bloom is the actress.
Yes, Rachel Bloom. Like I really love how she incorporates musical theater into it. Because for me personally, I really like musical theater, so I was like, okay, I can get with this. And then at the same time, I was like, you know what? I do be kind of thinking in songs sometimes. So I was like, you know what? I kind of do. That's not to say everybody with BPD does, but I just really like how she presents it in such like a normal way. You know, it's not like there's like these like red lights around this person and they're like always in these like dark clothes or they're always just like mean all the time. I'm like, no, like, you know, Rachel Bloom's character, I think it's Rebecca, is just a normal human being where like there's different times throughout the season in certain episodes where she just has this like impulsive like she has like these impulsive behaviors. Like have you guys seen the show at all?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
So I guess I have to put them on my list too. Okay. Just like I had to learn about sloths. So I have to put these on my
right. well, I don't want to I don't think it'll spoil anything if I say it. I don't think it'll spoil like a big thing. But I remember in one of the episodes she went on a date with one of the guys. Like she was on a date. And then while she was on that date, she like abandoned the date and had like sex with another dude. And I was just like, that's like that happens. But like I'm just so glad it wasn't like presented in like such like an over dramatic like way. I'm like, yeah, like that happens. Like that's kind of what we do sometimes. So I thought Crazy Ex-Girlfriend was pretty good, and them using comedy and musical theater, because musical theater can already be exaggerated, so like presenting it in this way sort of normalizes the behavior in the show, which I thought was pretty well done.
Okay.
Yeah, I always feel like mental health is kind of a hit or miss in media, like the way that it's presented, and it's often presented like really bad. I'm spending a lot of time watching like shows about mental health. I was watching Ratchet, which is like super
that just came out.
It's so sensationalized, and it's like I don't like this. But then some things, like, it's good that they're really portraying like how, you know, mental hospitals were really like torture chambers back then, and still are in a lot of places.
And I can totally agree with that. I feel as a clinical therapist, mental health can definitely be misrepresented in the media. Especially, it's amazing to see. Do you guys remember the movie that came out about 2 years ago with the gentleman with the multiple personality disorders?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I refuse to watch it. I was like,
my whole team and I actually went to see that.
Right? What y'all think?
And it was really interesting to see how, you know, as we sat and said, this is really just not how it would ever be, right? So sometimes as a mental health therapist, I am disappointed about how mental health is portrayed in the media. Sometimes I feel like mental health is portrayed in a very negative place in the media, when we need to really work on normalizing mental health in the media. Right. And so platforms like this, you know, kind of help to normalize mental health journeys and mental health struggles and things like that people are going through. So I think we have to do a better job with kind of normalizing that, hey, this is actually something that's pretty normal for people to go through and experience. And when you have a family member, or when you have someone that you're close to that may be going through that time, being afraid is probably not the place to be, right? Or portraying it some type of way is not the place to be. I mean, in the mental health world, we even, you know, I'm guilty of having done this before. I think as I became more mature in my practice, when we say things like, oh, I'm OCD, right? Or, you know, oh, she's acting bipolar.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, she's borderline. Right?
Yeah.
So even in some of those verbiages, I think that we have to be really careful with that, because we actually have people that struggle in those areas. And I guarantee you the way we're loose with it and our language with it is probably not how they're experiencing, or how someone who actually has that is experiencing that type of stuff. So I do agree with you definitely on that one, Nyla, about how we portray mental health in the media. We need to do a better job of normalizing that in the media.
Hopefully Ashley will keep acting and we'll get to like see her in a TV show one day doing it.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Honestly, I've been wanting to like write something like a show, whether it be like a comedy or drama, just about just a Black woman with, you know, mental health diagnoses. Like I've always wanted to do that.
That's the other part. Like when it does get, like on the rare occasion that it does get into media and it's a good portrayal, it is never Black people ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like I literally can't think of one example. Can you guys? I can't.
No, actually, typically when yes, I agree 100%. I think that's another problem with representation, right? We are not represented a lot in areas that we may see as more severely mental health areas in the media, right? And I think that's one thing culturally that may force us to struggle a little bit with not feeling comfortable talking about it. Just like Ashley stated, hey, being a Black woman with borderline personality disorder, I didn't know how to feel about that, or I didn't know how it would be received about that, because Black women are not portrayed in mainstream media as having those issues, right? And so it is very difficult for a Black woman to come forth and say, hey, I struggle with this, right? Because that's not something that we see very commonly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They've been doing a better job of like showing us like, you know, dealing with like the mental health, like from a specific trauma. Like I May Destroy You is a pretty good example of that. So they've been doing better on that. But like, I really love that you pointed out, Crystal, that like, they're not really covering severe mental illnesses, right? Like chronic mental illness, things that are extremely stigmatized. Like, I mean, are we ever going to get a good portrayal of a Black woman with schizophrenia? Probably not. Like, probably not. Like, let's just be real. So, I don't know. I hope it changes.
So, I do have another question for you ladies, if we don't have an audience at all. I want to know what brought you ladies to this space. What made you decide? I mean, Ashley comes from a marketing side of the house. Nyla, you come from a writing side of the house. Like, how did you come into the mental health space? Now, I know what brought me here, right? What brought me to that, right? But how did you guys come into this space, and what made you motivated, and the advocacy that you guys do, and how serious you take this space? How did that even happen?
You want to go first, Nyla?
Okay. Oh my gosh, such a long journey. So I think one thing that's important to know about me is I've actually been mentally ill like kind of my whole life. I was diagnosed with PTSD at 6, but I'm sure that I was exhibiting symptoms of something before that, which actually isn't as uncommon as it sounds. There are lots of children all over who are struggling with lots of stuff. Bipolar disorder can happen for children, PTSD, depression, things like that. But I think that I've never really known any other kind of life. So I think that it's kind of impossible for me to talk about my life experiences without talking about mental illness. And I also come from a family where mental illness is pretty prevalent. And I think just as I grew older, and when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in college, I just started kind of wondering about like the relationship to environment and genes and mental health. And I also started writing a lot about it because it was just a way, just the same as I had done as a child, where I read and wrote as like an imaginative way of kind of like dealing with what I was feeling. Kind of like what you were talking about, Ashley, where you were like, you really appreciated the musical theater part. Like writing was that for me. Like it was a creative and imaginative way for me to process what I was feeling. And so in college, I was writing and I wasn't really showing people. And, you know, but it was a way to just sort of go through that. And then I think when I started my writing career, I actually wasn't writing about mental health. I wrote like a few pieces, but I really kind of moved towards writing about race. And then I got a job at Bustle, and it was for like the health and lifestyle section. And so I had to write about mental health a lot, but not really severe mental health issues. And I also really didn't want people to know that I had been diagnosed with bipolar. And I also at this time was like, which is a symptom of bipolar disorder, if people don't know that, where you kind of like convince yourself that you don't have it. It's actually really shitty because it's like, so a symptom of this illness is me saying I don't have this illness. That's terrible. But it like keeps you from getting, help, because the literal symptom is you're like, I am not bipolar. That's not me. So one, I was dealing with denial, and two, I didn't really want anyone to know that I had been diagnosed with it. And so I really only publicly said that I was struggling with depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And I think that this is kind of a sidebar, but one thing that I later became really passionate about was really talking about severe mental health, because I feel like we have normalized talking about depression and anxiety. We have normalized burnout. Like people no longer feel, I don't even want to say the same amount of shame. There really isn't that much shame at all with people saying, I am anxious, I am depressed, I am sad, I am really, burnt out at work to the point where it's just breaking me down. Like there really isn't shame attached to that anymore. I think that, we keep saying, let's normalize it. Let's normalize it. It is normalized. I know that sounds pretty harsh, but it is. It really is. I mean, take the pandemic, for instance. All over Twitter, people are comfortable sharing how anxious they are right now, how depressed they are right now, how sad they are right now. What isn't normalized is things like bipolar, is things like borderline personality disorder. It is things like schizophrenia. So basically, how I moved from talking about mental health in these very like general terms that most people could identify with to getting way more serious is I had a suicide attempt. It was not my first. It was my like 5th or 6th. Because I've also been suicidal since I was 11. And this time it was pretty public because I had reached out online for help. And I felt like I don't want to say I felt like I didn't have a choice, but it felt like, okay, I've kind of outed myself as, being more than someone who gets sad sometimes, so I might as well just be open about it. And so I just kind of just started being open about it and just really, writing and talking, about what it's like to sometimes hear voices when you're manic. And I think that was very hard. Like when you have people who are going to judge you, who are going to call you crazy, who are going to call you dangerous even, because that's another thing that I really struggle with, is that a lot of the symptoms of our illnesses are perceived as inherently dangerous. When in fact they're not. Like there's nothing dangerous about someone talking rapidly. There's nothing really dangerous about someone really hearing voices, but those are things that people have been conditioned to be scared of. So anyway, that's kind of how I got here to this point. It was a long journey, definitely something I've been dealing with my whole entire life, but I'm really glad to be in a space now where I don't really give a shit about like talking about my mental health, like, publicly, because it's like, it brings me more fulfillment to be honest than it does for me to be like, I have anxiety, and not be like, no, I have panic attacks 3 times a day. And that's good for me. Like that's like a, but yeah, but also like to be clear, I'm like on meds now. And so my life is completely different. That's not the same for everyone. Like before when I was on meds, this is actually the first time I'm on meds that it actually worked. Hallelujah. But, you know, sometimes it takes a really long time for people to get to that point, which is another reason why I also speak out a lot about people kind of demonizing people for having trouble with their mental health. Like, oh, you need to seek therapy. You need to get medication. You need to do this. It's like people don't understand that sometimes that stuff just doesn't work for people. Sometimes it takes a really long time. We talk a lot about people getting therapy. Sometimes low cost therapy doesn't work because it's actually really shitty because people, their schedules are overloaded. They don't have enough time to, you know, pay attention to each individual client. A lot of people who can afford to be a low cost to no cost therapist are white. And so they may not be able to identify with your experiences. I know here in Denver, when I was working at a nonprofit, I was like, I want to get therapy. And I reached out to the place because I was working at a nonprofit. So I reached out to a place that had affordable rates. Everyone there was white. And I just felt like, how can I talk to you about people who call me the N-word in my mentions? Like how, like, it was just such a disconnect. So anyway, that was very rambling, but just, that's kind of just like an overview of like the things specifically within the space that I've been super interested in tackling and talking about. So yeah, I'm gonna pop out of the screen and grab my charger for a second.
Okay.
And also when Nyla discussed like, hey, you know, the therapy doesn't necessarily work for everyone at that time. As a therapist, I will say therapy does not work for everybody, right? Therapy is not necessarily the only way, right, that people can deal with their journey and deal with the bump in the roads in their journey. But I would say it's important to find a way to deal with those things, right? Even if you decide that therapy is not going to be the thing for you, what other ways are you dealing with these things? Now, you know, when we are thinking about more mental health diagnoses that are, not to say one diagnosis is more significant than another, but yes, I understand that some, just like Nyla said, hey, it took me a while, you know, to find a medication regimen that actually worked for me. You know what I mean? And so I remember us talking also, it took a while for you to find a therapist that works for you. So mental health is just not something we can sprint 100 yards to and win, guys. It is just not something that we can do in that shape, that way. We have to make sure we find the right fit. And so I'm just really hoping that, you know, especially this platform for sure, you know, can kind of provide some of that real raw and uncut insight into kind of some of that stuff as well. So I just definitely wanted to say, for the record, I am a therapist that says therapy ain't for everybody. Right. It's not for everybody. It doesn't work for everybody. You just have to find out what works for you.
Very few people actually say that. That's why that's so refreshing to hear. Because very few people say that. But it's true. And I think, you know, and we can probably, maybe this will be a show later, but we can like also talk about the fact that like, you know, people say like Black people don't seek therapy because there's a huge stigma in the Black community. And it's like, well, you know, yes. And also, you know, maybe the, you know, system, you know, that was created by white people doesn't really feel true to us. You know, kind of culturally, we've always been a community-based people. So sometimes people like they heal better like when their system is made up of a bunch of different people in their community, checking on them, talking with them, you know, being there for them. That might work better than, you know, sitting with somebody who's trained to sort of be detached from them, right, every week. Mm-hmm. So I feel like there's also a culture element that doesn't get explored enough. But I feel like saying things like that makes people feel validated while also giving them hope by saying, hey, therapy may not work for you, but that doesn't mean you have to be in pain.
Exactly.
There's so many other stuff that
you got to find what works for you. You got to find what works for you. And sometimes that in itself takes time, right? It takes time. So, oh yes, you're right now. That's a whole nother show. When we talk about the culture and our own issue. You know, I'm ready for that one because, yeah. All right, Ashley, how did you get to this space, man?
Well, first, before I answer the question, I'm just going to apologize to the audience. I see your comments are coming in, so let me highlight a couple really quickly. I'm so sorry, you guys. I'm gonna own it. I'm owning it.
Oh, let's get it.
Own it. So we had like a couple come in like through Facebook, like from Isabel Garcia. Yes, blackity black representation. Thank you. And then we did get a question from YouTube. Is there anywhere online we can find these works? I think this was related to when I was talking about my solo performances, and Nyla, I think when you were talking about some articles that you've written in the past.
Oh, okay. You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Sure. So for me, you can actually watch my solo performance, Who Wants to Be a Neurotypical, on YouTube. If you just search my name, Ashley Jaye, you should see like a cute little black face, and just tap that right there. And it's one of the highlighted videos there. You can watch it through YouTube. Or if you follow me on Twitter, it's actually my pinned tweet. So you can watch it in there. Nyla, how can people find your works?
So the best way to find my work is I am like, I should get a website, but like I'm working on it. So the best way to find my work is to follow me on Twitter, where I post a lot of not just my work, but just my daily thoughts. Like, I could be, writing about breast milk just off the cuff, but just in a tweet, some creepy dude, sugar daddies. But I do actually post like serious work on there too. It's kind of like weird because it's like, I'll be talking about something that's like probably wildly inappropriate. And then I'll be like, here's my interview with Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, where we talked about the Black maternal disability.
Yes.
And like, so my timeline is chaotic. But yeah, follow me on Twitter at Yum Coconut Milk. It's like,
there you go.
It's right.
It's right here.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And that's my Instagram handle too. And my Instagram, sometimes I'll post work like on my stories. But mostly I just post like pictures. So yeah, those are two places to like see what I'm up to.
Dope. And let's look at one more comment from Facebook. So proud of you, Crystal. Platforms like this normalize mental health. Mental health touches everyone's life, whether it is themselves, family, or friends.
Thank you, Jovi. Thank you.
Thank you for that lovely comment, Jovi. Yes, we definitely need more platforms like this. And I honestly think since the pandemic, there's been so many more popping up. Like everyone's like, I got a podcast, which is actually good because there's just a full like diversity of content that's out there now.
Exactly.
Yeah. People are either bacon or
podcasting.
Like sometimes it's both. Like
right.
Really accomplished people, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, you made something in aspic.
Right.
Go ahead, girl.
But to answer Crystal's question, would you mind repeating it?
So I asked you guys what kind of brought you to this space? Like, how did you get to this mental health advocacy space? I know you talked about personal experiences that you had as well. And I just kind of want to know what got you here, because marketing actually is totally in a world I don't even know nothing about. So how did you get into this space?
How did I get into the mental health space? I honestly would say it was a lot of my personal experience and a mixture of solo performance. So through a lot of my personal experience, I just felt really like ashamed and alone as I was going through it. Because a lot of my symptoms and diagnoses, they showed up in high school, but they didn't really like show up or like affect me until college. And around like 2015 and 2016-ish, that's when I actually had my first suicide attempt. And that was also when I got my diagnosis of depression. So that was my first diagnosis. And then about 2 years later in 2018, after I was hospitalized for another suicide attempt, and at that time it was about my third, I shortly after that hospitalization, I got the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. It was I had to kind of pull some teeth to get that diagnosis, to be honest, because like the doctors were like, you seem like too nice to have BPD. And I was like, okay. And so I got BPD in the diagnosis in 2018. And then this year, I actually got the official diagnosis of PTSD. And I'm like, this all makes sense for me. Like, it's just all encompassing. Like, all of my diagnoses have been separated. So, like, 2 years apart from each other, honestly. And so I would say back in about 2018, maybe it might have been like 2018. That's when I started getting into the solo performance scene, because one of my speech and debate coaches, she did a class in San Francisco. Shout out to Martha Reinberg. She did a class with Martha Reinberg called Solo Performance Workshop. And I went to watch her solo performance. And afterwards, we went out to dinner and she was like, you should try it. And I was like, And she's like, you just write your own thing and then just like perform it. And I was like, no, I don't know how to write like my own show. Like, how am I going to do that? And she said, well, you did speech and debate. And I'm like, yeah, but those things were prepared. Like, I just kind of like pulled it from a book and like memorized it. Like, this is not something I write myself. And she's like, just give it a try, like whatever. And I was like, fine. And when I took one of Martha's first classes, I remember her saying that the more specific you are in your story, the more universal it is. And I don't know if she borrowed that from somebody else, but that's what she said. And that just always stuck with me. And so when I started writing my first solo performance, it was more of a comedy, but it was still sort of a mashup of like some vignettes that I had. But like the main premise of the show was there was these different people trying out to star as me in a biopic. So it was essentially a casting call for different people to star as me in a movie about me. So I play like different characters. And within playing those different characters, they all sort of talked about my experience with depression and being Black and being a woman. And then when I got my BPD diagnosis in 2018, that was when I was like, wow, this is not talked about a lot. And I couldn't find many other Black women with BPD at the time. And so I just was like, you know what? I'm just going to write the show about my experience and let's see what comes of it, because I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. So let me just kind of just put it out there. And sure enough, I put it out there. And then other Black women with BPD were like, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one. And they're like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. And I was like, ah. And then, we're just like, oh my God, fangirling moment. Like, we both have it, And so it was just really refreshing to just put myself out there like that, because I hadn't done that before. And like Nyla was saying earlier, how, she started being more open about her bipolar disorder. I started being more open about having BPD and then having depression and then also now having PTSD. Well, official diagnosis, not like all of a sudden I got it this year. It's the official diagnosis. Yeah. And so just from sharing my experience, it's just really opened many more doors for me. And I'm just riding the wave to see where it takes me.
Wow. Okay.
So I think that since it's like the last 10 minutes, are we going to talk about what is in store for SPSM for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, we could mention a little bit more. I know we mostly talked about October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. For the rest of the year, girl, we still planning that out. But girl, you know,
we've gotten a lot. So I will say this. I am super excited about even just our planning sessions. I think we've at least planned out the things we want to do over the next 6 months. And now we're just working our guests and all of those people. But I am just excited about the diversity of people and topics that you are going to be bringing to this platform. I started watching SPSM when I had to get a Twitter in 2018 for class, right? And then I became aware of this platform then. And then when Rudy was like, yeah, it's a wrap. And I'm like, what? And I saw you guys going back and forth about, yeah, who's going to be the next host? Oh my God. And then it ended up being you. And then when you DM'd me and say, hey, would you be interested in joining me and Nyla? And I'm just really excited. At least for me, one thing I want to bring to this platform is just honest, transparent conversations and guests and experience and live experiences for people who are experiencing things in the mental health realm. And just keep in mind that mental health is not just, like we said, anxiety or depression. It can be substance use. It can be domestic violence, right? It could be sexual assault. It could be so many things outside of just the big word of mental health. So I'm just excited about all the variety that we've already discussed about what we're going to bring to the year. And of course, you know, what you're going to get from me, you're going to get honesty, you're going to get transparency, right? A lot of times I tell folks, I'm not your traditional therapist now, so don't get your feelings hurt, okay? So I'm super excited just about hearing about other people's experiences and the guests that you're going to be bringing to the platform. And so I'm ready for that. And then I'm super excited. So we do got some plans, you know. Yes. We got at least the next few months planned out, girl.
That's true.
More than anything, I'm just really excited to talk about mental health with like 2 other Black women every Sunday. Like, when do you get to do that? Because like, I love everybody. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, you know, I feel like it's like, you know, I love talking about mental health with everybody, but like sometimes you be talking about something, some white person be talking, and you're like, that ain't what's happening right now. Like, why are you even talking about that?
Yes. Like, why?
Like, and it's like, it's really cool to just be able to talk about these specific issues with people who also understand that other side of our identity. And even when people are not Black, I feel like understanding specifically like what other communities go through, because the face of mental illness is a white face. That has just been what we've seen. Interestingly enough, I just want to point out, and maybe we can discuss this in another show, there have been so many shows with Black women therapists now. And I find that interesting. I have a lot of thoughts about that. But generally, like, the face of mental illness and mental health treatment is white. That's not only what we see in media, but that's who we see with the loudest voices speaking out. And, you know, just recently we've had a lot more Black people coming, you know, forward and really like sharing their stories and stuff. And so I'm just really excited to talk to people who get it. Not just what I'm experiencing or have experienced like mentally, but also just like culturally, and that feeling of that added layer of race, ethnicity, that really complicates a lot of the issues that we're talking about. Like, for one thing I always talk about is like, when you see those movies about bipolar white girls and like they are having like a manic episode in the middle of the street, and like they're just, you know, and I'm like, I'd probably die. Like, I would be shot by like the police. So I don't identify with that, honestly, because, and, you know, and people, it's funny because like I've been to doctors who are like, you're the clearest case of bipolar disorder I've ever seen. And I'm like, I don't know if I should feel special or not. But there are also things that white people say are part of their experience that are not part of my experience. There are certain ways that even in my illness, even when my brain is in that state, it knows not to do certain things because of my experience and not to act certain ways. And like, it's so interesting because a white person would never get that. They're like, well, if you're bipolar, you're bipolar. And I'm like, I don't do stuff that you do. I would never go up to a cop and try and take his gun while I'm manic. It just wouldn't be something that I thought about. So I feel like the intersection of race and mental health is going to be really interesting to get.
Yeah. And I know we got to wrap up, Ashley, but let me just say, I posted an article on Twitter a couple days ago talking about the percentage of Black therapists. And when we see 4% of Black clinical therapists are Black, 4% Asian, and 6% Latina. So we already working against, a different type of therapeutic. The person who's helping with therapy, we don't have a lot of those opportunities in our space. But I just sense that once we, with all these things that have happened over the last, especially the last year with COVID and this pandemic about race and police brutality and all of these things, I am so excited to see the data and the energy in the next 3 to 5 years of what that's going to look like and what Black mental health data and research is going to look like going forward, because that is something that we don't have a lot of. We don't have a lot of research on Black mental health, right? And Dr. Jaye talked about that in the mental health racism conference about why. And that's going to be for another show too. See, we got so much to do. So, we don't have a lot of representation in our community to foster that comfortability to seek mental health. So it is definitely common that more therapists are white, are white. So that's pretty common. So I'm gonna be quiet on that because I know we got a little bit and we got to let Ashley wrap it up.
Well, we did have a comment come in related to our question of like, what topics are you interested in hearing about on SPSM? So we got one from Toes84. So before the election, I'd be interested to hear you all address the election's impact on suicide and mental health.
Oh,
now that's a biggie one.
I won't get in all that.
I know, like,
yeah.
Toes.
That's
my ministry.
Hey, I mean, it's an honest question.
No, it's a good question, but I was like, oh, I don't want them coming after me.
I think that's something we can definitely talk about amongst the three of us and see who would be great to bring into that conversation with us and talk.
Great question.
That was amazing. So make sure we actually, is there a way to hold these questions in, like where we can store them somewhere?
I mean, I can copy and paste.
Yeah.
I know how to do that.
Yeah. Because I think that's a good one. That's a really good one. I would love to.
I think the visceral reaction to it proves that it's a good one. Because I was
yes.
like, oh, hell no.
Yeah, I was like, I keep my politics and suicidality separate.
But you know what? I think one thing that the approach to take with something like that is looking at the impact, right, of where we are politically in the United States and how that's impacting people of color. We can take, taking it from that perspective, because I think it is impacting everybody. But I think politics does impact all of us differently. I do. And I think that's a great topic. And we should brainstorm that one because we can really get some good out of that one. All right. Thank you for that one. We are going to get back with you on that one.
I hope I said your name right. Toes84.
All right.
Okay, so we'll definitely keep that topic in mind, put it on our roster. But it's 3:00 now, y'all. Well, 3:00 here in Pacific time, 4:00 for my folks over there in Mountain time, and 5:00 or 6:00 for those on Eastern time.
Yeah.
Had to math for a little bit. So thank you so much for tuning in today, guys. Don't forget to follow SPSM on Twitter, Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. Don't forget to tell your friends, family members, your dogs, your cats, lizards. Tell everybody. Tell everybody about it.
Make sure you tell them what we're going to be doing next week so they can remember.
Right. So up next week, we will be having a critical review of modern day suicide prevention efforts, as well as just taking a look at the messaging from Suicide Prevention Month from this past month, because September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. So we'll be taking a look at that with a panel of guests that you will soon hear about it on social media.
And you're going to love them.
Yes.
So we're super excited to talk about that. So, yay.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Bye. Take care.